Hello and welcome to video 12 in my Modelling in Maya series. Your base mesh is complete, so in this bonus video I wanted to walk you through my process for UV mapping her, making the model ready to be textured. Now keep in mind two things. Although Maya has many UV mapping tools, I prefer to focus on just a few key ones to get the results I need quickly and easily, so this won't be an in-depth course covering every single tool. Secondly, I apologise if there are any sudden jumps in the video. Maya wasn't behaving on the day I recorded this and decided to crash numerous times. So yes, I was looking at this screen for a lot of the time. I'm sure you can all relate. Now just a quick final note, if you're coming to this video simply for the UVs, make sure you check out the full course too so you can see how we built the model. Okay. Before we start, how would you like to help shape the future of this channel and keep these videos free? The quickest and easiest way to show support is to hit the thanks button below this video, or alternatively, simply visit my Ko-fi page and treat me to a coffee. Another option is to visit the antCGi store. Here you will find lots of free downloads, plus all the course assets and scripts from each of my courses. Finally, you could become a member of the antCGi club. For a small monthly donation, you will get access to some exclusive rewards and member perks. Just click the join button below to get started. Remember, the more support I get, the more time I can dedicate to creating more high quality content just for you. To get more information on how you can help, follow the link on the screen or in the description below. Okay, let's get on with the video. Alright then, so here is the model. And in an attempt to try and reduce the number of crashes I was getting, I decided to disable anti-aliasing and also ambient occlusion. So she may look a little more jagged than usual. And just a quick note, it didn't really help. Let's switch to a split pane view and set the left panel to be the UV editor. So this first square here is the main texture page area. So if you imagine your texture sitting here, the UVs will lay on top. If I select the model, we can see the UVs are a total mess. You can see it on the model too. Ideally, we want a nice clean checker pattern. First, let's apply a basic layout to clean things up for us and pull things together. This will also make the UVs more readable. So, open the planar options under the UV menu. Okay, we want to use the default values, so keep bounding box, but change project from to the Z-axis. We want to project from the front. Let's apply that. And there, you see we have a cleaner layout on the model. And it's matching the UV page. Oh, if you can't see the texture, click this button here. The one on the right is to make it visible in the viewport. The one on the left displays it in the UV editor. If we look at the side of the model, there's a problem, and as you can see, the texture is stretched. It's also reversed on her back, and this is because the texture is just being projected from the front. So it's just going through the model. So we need to unwrap the UVs, sort of like unwrapping a present. I'll just delete the history, just in case. I'm going to be doing this a lot as I work through, just in case that's contributing to the crashes. And let's hide the texture in the UV editor. I'll simplify the main view too. It will make it easier for us to work. What we want to do now is start to divide the UV shells into sections, and that's what we call a series of connected UVs, a shell. Remember that we aren't working on vertices in the UV editor. They look like them, but they are in fact the UVs. First, select a series of edges around her neck. Let's form a full loop, and in the UV editor, hold Shift and right click and go to Cut. This will separate the head UVs from the body, and you can see we have a cut now because the lines are thicker. I'm going to hide the eyes and brows for now. Inside the head we have part of the mouth bag, so we need to separate that too. Let's try these edges. I'll check on the outside of the model to make sure the edges are inside the mouth. Looks good, so cut those. Now I need to select the head UVs So I'll right click and switch to UVs and select some on the head. And now hold Ctrl and right click to bring up the marking menu. Now go to UV shell. This will expand the selection to the whole UV shell. We can now move the head up and it's separated. You can see the inside of the mouth is left behind because we also cut that and separated that into its own UV shell. What we want to do now is go around and separate the limbs too. I'll speed things up here, but you essentially want to find a loop around the arms and hips, and this is where good topology comes in handy. Not that this is bad, but it would be nice to have a clean loop we can use. Okay, cut those. Now let's add a cut running from her forehead and down the back of her head. It's important to put seams in places that aren't too obvious, so we don't want one down the front of her face. She will eventually have hair, so if this seam is an issue, the hair will hide it. Okay, around the hip next. And I'll do around the ankles too. A quick clean. And I'll save too. Yep, crashed. Luckily, I saved. Now these are separated, we need to create more seams so the UVs can be unfolded. At the moment they're like tubes, so they need a cut so that they can be opened up and laid flat. Like I said earlier, we ideally want them hidden. So let's select an edge on the inner leg. Actually, this might be easier if I separate the UV shells first. You see, those edges are selected still, but it's easier for us to deselect the ones we don't need in the UV editor. Remove the ones from the torso, and the feet, and the outer legs too. We don't want to cut any of those. Okay, now we have this selection, let's cut them. We're going to unfold these shells now, so select the UVs. Let's open the UV toolkit. This is quite neat as it gives you access to all the main tools. And dock it over here. What we want is the unfold option, and if I hold Shift and click the button, it opens up the options. You see, in the method section, we have two main options. Unfold 3D was added to Maya in version 2015, so it's been in quite a while now. And if I remember correctly, prior to that, it was an external plugin. This is now the default option, and what this will do is simply unfold the UV shells for you while attempting to retain the correct component spacing, giving you a more accurate UV layout. If I apply that, you see the legs have been unwrapped now and are flat. If we look at the model, you can see the squares are more uniform, which is what we want. Let's look at the legacy options now. So these are the original tools which existed before Maya 2015, and even though they are older tools, I still use them as much as Unfold 3D. There are lots of options to play with, and most of them are self-explanatory, but I tend to just use the unfold constraints. These will restrict the movement of the UVs. So if I select horizontal and apply, you see the UVs have only unfolded along the x-axis. Now this is a nicer layout for us, and we don't need to rotate the shells like we would have with Unfold 3D. The layout isn't perfect though, but now we have this, we can then try Unfold 3D again. And this relaxes the UVs more while keeping the orientation of the shells. Okay, that's looking good. Let's look at the torso now. And first we need some extra seams so the UVs can open up. The best place for these is down her sides, so the seam is hidden when her arms are lowered. I'll enable symmetry, select this edge loop, and quickly deselect the edges from the limbs in the UV editor. We also need a cut in the crotch area too, or it won't unwrap. So we can select these here as it's a nice hidden area, and cut those. Let's try the legacy method first. And now unfold 3D. Okay, so it didn't work out as well as with the legs, but it's worth experimenting with both options. I find they work better together sometimes. So let's reorient this. And keep in mind this may not be the final layout for these shells. We will come back and adjust them more later. Okay, now let's unfold the arms. First select an edge loop. I'll hide the texture for now so we can see what we are doing. Maybe this one instead. And what I'm also going to do is cut around the fingers too, so we have a top and bottom for the hand. What I don't want though is to cut the back of the arm. I want this to be a single UV shell, not two. Ideally, the fewer seams you have, the better. Okay, let's connect these edge loops. And on the wrist. It's not perfect, but once this is unwrapped, we will have a clearer view of what's going on, and then we can make more adjustments. Again, let's make sure there are no edges selected on any other parts of the body. And cut those. Select the UV shells. And unfold. I'm just using Unfold 3D first this time, because the shells are a little more complicated with the fingers. So let's leave those as they are for now and continue with the initial unwrapping. Okay, now the head. First, we should move the UV shell up so it's away from everything else and we can see it better. We already created a cut around the top and back of her head, so let's just unfold it and see what we get. Okay, that's not too bad. The eyes are an odd shape though. A quick tip, if you want areas where there are holes to retain their shape more, just temporarily fill them. Let's see how this looks. Okay, so no different with Unfold 3D. Let's try the legacy options. First horizontal, and now vertical. I don't tend to use the none option, not very often anyway, because most of the time the results aren't great. Doing it horizontally and then vertically gives you more control and more predictable results. You can see now that the UV shell looks better, especially around the eyes. If they weren't filled, you could end up with the UVs collapsing. Another tip, if filling the holes doesn't work alone, triangulate the new polygons, and this may help stabilise the UVs more. Let's show the texture again. So the squares on the face are quite large, and this is another important thing to keep an eye on. Ideally, the squares in your grid should be a uniform size all over the body. Now this does depend on what you're working on. For example, if there are a lot of close-ups of the face, it's worth dedicating more UV space to that area because you're going to need more detail in there. But in general, begin with a uniform layout and then you can play around with things later. Now the neck is kind of an issue because the neck pattern is much smaller here, so I may come back to that later. Okay, what's next? Ah yes, the feet. So, enable symmetry first. Select the edges down the back of the foot. And now around the foot and the toes. So the sole for the foot is separate. Let's hide the floor plane first. Around here. Over the toes. This doesn't match up. Again, this is where a better edge flow would help. We can work around it though. Okay, let's just connect here. And between the toes too. So we can cut those. select the UVs. I'll disable symmetry as it does impact performance when selecting UVs. Not sure why though. Now unfold those. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. We can now start to edit these base shells. First, let's orient the arms. And I don't like how this section sticks out. So let's cut along here and around here. I want to stitch this to the other side now. All I need to do is select the edges, and you can see that it automatically selects the connected edges on the model for me. Hold Shift and right click. Now go to Move and Sew Edges, and this will move this UV shell over to connect with the other side. Let's sew these edges here now, and again I can see which it will connect to as I hover over the edges. Now sew these. Okay, let's unfold this again, first to lay out the UVs now we have changed the shell. I'll use Legacy because I want to keep the orientation. Horizontally first, and now vertically. Or you could just use Unfold, but it depends on the results you want. Let's adjust the foot shells. The soles do look too small, so we need to scale them up. And we can check on the model to make sure the squares are roughly the same size. We should sew these edges too on the heels. Okay, onto the torso. I prefer my UV shells to be a bit more uniform, especially if the model is symmetrical. Move this first. I'm going to select the central edges and convert that selection to UVs. What I can do now is use the Align tools to bring them all together so they are all in a straight column. I can hold Shift and invert the selection now. This will restrict the unfolding to just the selected UVs, so they will unfold around the central ones. And I'll use Legacy again, unfold horizontally first, and that brings them all into alignment, and now vertically. That's looking cleaner. The crotch area is a bit too compact, so I'm just going to use None this time to open that up. I'll do the other end too. So you see that didn't work as well. Let's try Unfold 3D. Well, neither did that really. Okay, let's fix this. Deselect the central UVs to pin them. And unfold that. Okay, cool. So I'm not completely happy with the torso, so I'm going to divide it again. There's some UV stretching going on here. I'll cut along the shoulders, switch to the default material first so I can see it. Enable symmetry, maybe cut along here, and cut those. Now select the UVs around this area. Disable symmetry, open the unfold settings, and let's go with Unfold 3D first. Okay, I'll move her back over a bit. I'll enable the main shader again. So that's looking better around her upper chest and shoulders. Back to the arms. I feel like we should detach the shoulders here. So select along here. And cut. We need to cut these in half now to match the cut we just did on the upper shoulders. So let's see. Looks like it's here. Okay, good. Now we want to move these and attach them to the torso shell. We can just select the outer edges. Is that split? Never mind. And now use Move and Sew to send them over to the other shells. And they've gone. We just need to tidy up some of these edges now and sew them. Okay, now to unfold this upper area again to spread things out. That's relaxed now and looking much better. Okay, let's look at the head. You will notice that the ears don't look good. The UVs are distorted and there doesn't seem much room in here. What's happening is because there are UVs around the head, these are compressing the UVs in the ear. In this instance, it might be better if we separated the ears so they have more room to spread out. So let's cut around them. And move them out. We can unfold them again now. And if you saw, the shape changed because there's more room for them to move. If we wanted, we could make the shells bigger too, again to get the grid size to match up with the surrounding area. Right, quick clean. And what I want to do now is organise the shells. We need them to be inside the first main grid square ideally. That is, if you're using a single texture page. It may be that you have separate ones for the body and the head. For us though, we will just stick with the one for now. I like to get the larger shells in first. You see, it takes me a few attempts to get a layout that I'm happy with. It's worth experimenting just to see how you can fit things together. I'll just check how the grid is looking on the model. The transform tools are really helpful with this, like rotate. And we can use the move tool to quickly snap this back a couple of squares. Oh, we still need to unfold the inner mouth section. And position it. Okay, so what we need to do now is go around areas like the fingers and toes to make sure there are no overlapping UVs. Now Maya does have a neat tool for highlighting these and any UVs that are reversed. The areas in blue are good, but keep an eye out for anything red. You see here, this is just an example, but this UV shell is flipped, so it's highlighted red, meaning that we have to flip it back. You can also display areas where the texture page is stretched or distorted. Here you can see the areas in red are stretched, and the blue areas indicate where the texture is possibly compressed. So it's good to use these to make sure the UV layout is as good as possible, but obviously on some models this may not be an option. We can delete those polygons we added in the eyes now, although we will do more on the eyelid UVs later. Actually, let's see if we can get a better layout for the head. So you can see here the mouth UVs are overlapping now. Okay, let's separate the inner mouth model temporarily. And again, let's fill the eye sockets and also the inner lips. If I select the UVs now, I'll make the window bigger, and we unfold it. I'll use Unfold 3D first, and now the legacy tools to tighten things up. I'll deselect the lower UVs to pin them. Okay, that looks a bit more natural. And this goes back to what I mentioned earlier in the video. The eyes and lips haven't collapsed because we added the temporary geometry, which added some tension in those areas. Okay, I'll leave this. It's looking better. Although the neck still bugs me, I might adjust that later. So let's rearrange the page. And delete those temporary polygons. Oh, I nearly forgot. We need to reattach the inner mouth model. Okay, good. So you will notice that even though we apply smooth mesh to the model, the UV shells still have a harsh angular border. This isn't great for your texture pages, especially if this is moving to another application, so you may want the UV shell borders to be smoothed too. You see, when I activate smooth mesh, the inner UVs are relaxed and smoothed, but the borders aren't. All we need to do is go into the attribute editor and find the Open Subdiv Controls tab. Now set UV boundary smoothing to preserve edges and corners. There we go. The UV shell borders are now smoothed too. There's one more step to the UVs, and that's to close the eyelids. We need to do this so they have space for a texture, otherwise when the character closes their eyes, the texture on the eyelids will be stretched. Now you can go in and manually edit the UVs, gradually closing the lids. But once the main border UVs are moved, you can then use the Optimize tools to spread out the rest of the eyelid UVs, like this. And also this, which helps save a lot of time. And this tool can be used to even out the UVs on other parts of the body. Okay, so that's the main UV layout complete. As always, I'm going to go in and work on it further. The neck is still bugging me, so I'm going to rework that too. So I'll be back in a second. So here is the final UV layout, and you can see I have changed things a bit and moved the shells around too. The neck no longer has those tiny grid squares, it's now more in proportion with the rest of the model. So there we go, we've come to the end of another course. We have covered my personal process for fully modelling a base mesh, and you can now take this model and reshape it to make other characters. As well as creating the main base mesh, we have also given her eyes, teeth and a tongue too. Again, these can be then reused on other models. Now remember to grab the source files from the antCGi store, which also include the rigged model, walk, jog and run cycles, all for you to experiment with. Thanks for coming with me on this journey, and I want to say an extra special thank you to the people who help support this channel. It's because of you guys that I can spend the time recording these videos, and I can upload them to YouTube so they're free for people who can't afford to spend money on expensive courses. Remember, if you have any questions, please post them in the antCGi community Discord server. That's the best place to reach me, and if I'm not available, there are plenty of other talented people around to help. Remember, to help support future content and keep these videos free, hit the thanks button below, visit the antCGi store, or join the antCGi club. You can also treat me to a coffee at my coffee page. The link is on the screen now and in the description below. Thanks again for watching. This is antCGi signing off, and I'll see you on the next course.